All right. Today's guest is Rosie Sherry. Rosie is all about community building. She started the software testing company, Ministry of Testing, which now has, I think, over 25,000 members. And after that, she led the community for indie hackers, a community of now more than 140,000 independent makers and creators. And today, she's the community lead at Orbit. Also a community management software, lots of community in there. Welcome, Rosie. Yeah. Really excited to have you on the show.
I think we're going to talk about community today, right?
Probably, right? Yeah, let's start there with your philosophy. I think it was on a blog of yours, the following quote, and let's start with that. Sometimes I have wondered whether it was a fluke that I grew Ministry of Testing with kindness, whether I was just being a hippie, and maybe I should have focused more on important stuff to grow a business. But I realize now that being kind is the best strategy for human, community, and business growth. So when you talk about kindness as a strategy, what does that mean to you in conjunction with community building and your experience with it?
Yeah, good question. I'm tempted to dive deep into this, write something on kindness specifically, because I mention it a lot in the things I say, but I haven't really kind of formalized my thinking around it. And I guess my struggles in the past with kindness is the business world and community, I guess, both. First, the business world, they don't seem to value kindness. It's you can't measure it, or they would perceive that you can't measure it. And it's just not very businessy to think about being kind. It's we want metrics, we want return on investment, we want this, we want that. And then if we think from the community perspective, the whole community world has just gone mad in the past year. So if we think previous to the past year, it's community lacked any kind of serious kind of consideration, serious funding, serious investment. So yeah, I guess kindness to me has always been about, I think I've always had this thing about community where I've kind of believed in community, even though I didn't always know what it meant, didn't always have descriptions for it. And I fell into community like most people do, and everything I've done has just been out of trying to think about how to be kind and good to people, and how to help people. So if I think about kindness, really it comes down to how can I help people? How can I build trust with people? And how can we help each other to grow as a community? And it just seems to work, and it's fun, right? And then if I compare it to other tactics that people often talk about when they think of community, is growth tactics and measuring something to the nth degree. I just don't. It's not that it doesn't work. It's just I don't enjoy it. And I think there is room for other tactics and other ways of measuring things and using data to grow communities. But I think at the heart of it is every community needs to have this intention to be good to one another and to have trust with each other, because that to me is the foundation of what every community needs.
Mm-hmm. And have you seen that when you give kindness in the business world, that it most of the time it comes back? Or have you how do you foster kindness, I guess, in other people? If you approach the community in a business, let's say, I guess there's also different kinds of communities, but if we talk about a community within a business of customers or with potential customers, how do you kind of go out of a little bit of the business world of like, growth and metrics, and foster the kindness in other people?
Yeah, I think it's, again, like I need to refine my thinking on this, but I think a lot of it is just human instinct. Is like when you're good to people, they feel obliged to give back. It's like, and they'll remember it. And I think the sad thing these days is that it doesn't take much to be kind. It doesn't take too much to stand out. And most people, like, they just want to be seen. They just want to be noticed. They just want to get that job. They just want to get that opportunity. And in the real world, to get opportunities, you have to jump through hoops and hoops and hoops. You have to go through processes. You have to fill in forms to get jobs. You have to fill in 100 forms to get a job or interview. So if someone, as a community, is a manager or builder, if you just like be that person that sees them and gives them something that they need, it almost completely blows their mind, I guess. And that they've been seen, that you see something in them that no one else has bothered to see. And to me, it's like that's that is kindness. It's like seeing something in other people that sometimes they don't even see. So I guess like I built a habit of it. And when I was building up Ministry of Testing, I was always looking. I was always looking. It was partly selfish, but always looking for people to do things that I didn't want to do. Right. So it's like I intentionally didn't want to get up on stage on anything we did, and I ended up doing conferences. So what do you do when you don't want to get up on stage, but you're leading this community of conferences? It's like you look for people, right? You intentionally look for people who would be good at that. So that's kind of like what I did. I was always looking for people with good ideas, new ideas, confidence, character, and something different, right? So, it's like, something that aligned with who I believed Ministry of Testing needed to be, all those kind of things. And then I would just approach them and, tell them, it's like, you should do this, you should do that, that's great. I'd compliment them. It's like, you did a great job at that. Or like, I love that idea. You should, there's something there. And, the lack of confidence that people have in themselves for someone to come up and to say that is, again, mind-blowing to people, and it opens their minds. And then if you can like give people opportunities based on that, then, that's what I would do, is that I would encourage them to speak. I would encourage them to host events. So we'd have hosts like the people who get up on stage introducing speakers. I would find people within the community to do that. And like over the years, there's like a generation of testers that grew up in Ministry of Testing, and they're still there today, religiously like supported Ministry of Testing and won't leave. They won't leave. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so, and I mean, you said in the quote that I mentioned in the beginning, like you were wondering though at one point, right, or several times maybe, like if that was a fluke and whether that kindness works. So like, what made you doubt it?
Yeah, I guess like I did Ministry of Testing, and I thought like as I was wondering what to do next after Ministry of Testing, I kind of thought I wanted to do more community stuff, but I wasn't sure. I was like, what do I do? It's like, can I build community again, in the way I have? Can I match it? Will people allow me to come with like my crazy kindness ideas? Will they appreciate that? Can I do the same for people in Ministry of Testing? In other communities, can I achieve the same kind of things? And like if I go into another community, what freedom will I have to actually like be myself and believe in the ways that I've kind of done things. And I think, you know, as well, like, you know, I built Ministry of Testing because, well, you know, there's many reasons why I did it, but one of the biggest reasons was it worked for me as a business, as an indie type business.
Yeah.
I built it around me. I built it around my family. I made it work for me because, like, you know, I've got lots of kids, and no one would hire me. You know, those kind of things. It's like, or I guess the other perspective is I didn't want to go and work for people who didn't want to adopt my working habits. So, you know, I figured out how to do things myself in a very non-traditional way, and very much not trying to be the same as everyone else. So, you know, I guess, you know, self-doubt, part of it. It's like, is it a fluke? Do I know what I'm doing? Yes, I studied community a bit, but at the end of the day, like a lot of it was just, I guess, like my own creativity, my own ideas, my own wanting to connect with people. And I guess another aspect is like, could I find another community that I wanted to serve and support as much as I wanted to support the Ministry of Testing community? And for me, that's a big part of my work is like, I can't just go and manage any community.
Right.
It has to be a community that I'm, you know, want to like spend like 24/7 in, or obviously not 24/7, but it's something that I want to spend, you know, it's like in my brain. It's like, you know, it's kind of like, for me, it's always switched on, always thinking about things, right? So it's like any opportunity that I take on, I want to love it, right? I want to love the niche, I guess, that I'm serving, and I want to be inspired by it.
And I mean, how important do you think, in your estimation, is it to be part of that group? So, like, I mean, for example, what I see a lot now, at least, still, the community function is inside marketing in companies, or like that's what they try to do. And oftentimes, marketers, unless they are marketing a B2B marketing tool, they're not really the user themselves, right? So in order to kind of understand the challenges that you can solve for your community, or you can support them with, like, how important do you think it is for a company to actually get someone in that is part of that group versus like kind of the company, it's like coming it out of a function like marketing, or like, I don't know, product, if it's more support or something like that?
Yeah. I think it's important to have crossover, definitely. Like, you know, I do love marketing. I've done a lot of research and learning over the years about marketing. I don't call myself a marketeer or a growth type person. So it's like, you know, I definitely value like different roles within companies. That they're all important roles. But like with community, I think there needs to be someone somewhere who's really like the champion for the community. Someone who really gets who the people are, and is perhaps one of them as well. Because I mean, you know, you don't have to be, but I think it's really hard to build community when you don't truly understand who your people are. If you're not like geeking out on the same kind of things that they're geeking out on, and if you're not willing to go deep, like they're going deep into things, for me, it's like I'd have to be interested in that to survive, right? I'd have to be excited about it. So I don't think it's necessary that everyone in the company or needs to have that passion, but to have someone there kind of like as an advocate to support the community, to speak from their voice is super, super important.
And where, like, I think a lot of companies, they're coming from the standpoint of like, yeah, well, we already have a community on like Twitter and our newsletter, and like that's what they, I would say, call a community. And I guess in a form it kind of is. It's definitely not theirs, but it is a community. So where, as a business, like if you have, maybe you can first go into like what you, in your terms, is the difference between kind of an audience of a newsletter and a community, and also then how do I go from an audience to a community?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good question. So, audience, generally speaking, is kind of one directional. So, like you're a speaker on stage and you're talking to everybody in the seats in the audience, and the community is more about connecting with people one to one and in groups. So if you imagine, the analogy that I tend to use these days is, instead of like all the seats facing the front, you have opportunities for people to face each other and talk to each other. It's not about the company per se, or about the influencer it might be on the stage. It's not about them. It's about the people and what the people want to talk about. So it's, having those conversations, facilitating those conversations, and trying to give value from that, and trying to support that as much as possible, and support what comes out of those conversations, which can be hard because sometimes it doesn't completely align with original intentions. But that's community. And then like if we go into the topic of like what exactly is community and who owns it, and what, if it's on a platform, is it actually a community? And I think these days we kind of have to think more broadly about like what community is. And one way that I'm trying to look at it is like community is about conversations between each other. The more, it's like the foundation of community is about connecting over conversations. So whether they're voice conversations like this, at events, over Twitter, whatever, they're conversations, right? And I think traditionally, like, people want to own that community conversation. They want to have it in their forum. They want to own their data. They want to own everything, right? But they can't, right? They can't. It's like, if you told that to community members, if a community member showed up at forum and you said, well, now that you're here, I own all your ideas and all the conversations and all the relationships you're building with these other members, they tell you to sort off, right?
Yes.
It's like you can't do that, right? So I think like we need to have a mindset shift. It's like, what does community mean, and does anyone own it? The answer is no, but like everyone owns it because we're all responsible for it.
And so, like, if we take, for example, a community like Indie Hacker, who, even as far as I know, kind of built their own platform, and hasn't even used anything that is out there, and obviously on Twitter and on LinkedIn and everywhere else, like, there is a lot of stuff happening around like indie developers, designers, creators, makers, however you want to call them. And then there is the aspect that is happening on Indie Hackers itself. So like, how do I need to think about this as a business owner? Like, right? I mean, you're saying, I think correctly, that you don't really own like the conversations, right? It's like the conversations between the people. But then as a business, like I always like as much that as a business owner, I want it to be about like kind of embracing the community. I need to justify to myself and to investors why I'm having this community. And so like how do you think about kind of combining the two, the kind of owned, I guess, platform, but you don't own the community, and then whatever's happening off the community? Like how do you, in the case, for example, now of indie hackers, how do you think about that?
Yeah, it's tough, right? There's no right answer. I definitely think that there's no right answer. I think owning a platform is a big responsibility. It takes a lot of work. I've seen the amount of work that goes into running indie hackers. You know, it's not an easy job. It comes with its challenges. And like with indie hackers itself, I see that more as a movement now. I think it's kind of moved on from just being indie hackers as a community. It's like, you know, people call themselves indie hackers. And the indie, you know, when they call themselves indie, you know, founders, indie hackers, or use a hashtag, they put it in their profile. It's more of a movement. Yeah. And so you can like take what you will from it. As Stripe acquired indie hackers. How will they get value from that? Can they measure that? I don't know if they can. As much as they want to, grow the traffic to their community, as much as they want to have more conversations happening there, I don't think they can force that. And I'm very much of the opinion that the conversations are increasingly happening elsewhere, and they're not happening on indie hackers. There's a lot of stuff, mostly on Twitter, I would say, these days. There's so many indie hackers sharing stuff. They call themselves indie hackers, but they share it all on Twitter. But, you know, and they don't share nearly as much as they, you know, could on the indie hackers website. And how do you deal with that as a community? But like, if you look at Stripe, I think about this a lot, right? And I'm not sure if I definitely align with like how Stripe think about it or how Cortland thinks about it. But if we think of like the original goal of Stripe with indie hackers, was they wanted to support it and they want to increase the GDP of the internet. Yeah, has indie hackers done that? Yes, they have, because not everyone, there's indie hackers everywhere building businesses and making lots of money, and they're using Stripe. So how much does it matter that they're not actually going to the indie hackers website? I don't know. Personally, it's like, does it matter that much? Possibly. Sure, it would be great if they went there more often. But if they think of like, does indie hacking just exist and become normalized? Like how great of a goal is that? Right? Is that right? Indie hacking becomes normalized.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. And I mean, just by what you mentioned with like, I mean, people are now using hashtags in their indie hacker hashtags in their bio, basically means like it kind of just almost transcended the initial vessel, right? And so I think if you think about it from a Stripe perspective, that in the end, it's not really measurable. It does reflect on the revenue, though. Like clearly, I mean, also if you look at platforms like Gumroad and stuff like that, I don't know if I guess they're with Stripe. I'm not sure. Or do they have their own platform? I'm not sure. But like, I mean, there's many platforms who use Stripe that are in the indie hacker community, and so it definitely affects the bottom line. Just everyone has a problem with it because you can't really measure it. And so, what do you say to the people in the board of directors, right? And that's and that's in the end, like I think the disconnect oftentimes, and it's interesting because I've kind of built we haven't really thought about it as a community necessarily, how it is used today, but we've built like just real world communities where we kind of went on retreats. We were freelancers and entrepreneurs, and we went on retreats, and we supported each other. We're like 150 people. And we just organized that, but it had really a business purpose behind it, right? And so, but still, like someone this could have been a business who actually started that kind of away from obvious business goals, and it would still have affected their bottom line. And so, to me, I think like, as a business, I think the hard thing is how do you get started, right? How do you make it non-businessy, I guess? Because I guess in India, I don't know how it was in Indie Hacker's case, but usually now, especially as you said over the last year, also David Spinks mentioned this, like it just exploded the whole, and in a way, I guess it's nice for all the community managers who said for years, like this is really powerful, like this is, and now all of a sudden it's here. But then I guess it's a bit frustrating because now it's like a business thing, right? Like now it's like okay, everybody wants to do a community and kind of make money off of it. How does one start a community within a business without it being businessy? So like, is that almost like a different name, kind of outside of the business, run by a person who has some doesn't need to report like all kinds of revenue numbers or whatever? What have you seen that works maybe with people that you talk to?
Yeah, what works? I think what works well is just believing in what community can bring, and not saying that you want a community, because like that's the wrong place to start, to say is that, oh yes, we want a community. You know, really you should start with, we want to help people. And so if you say like we want a community, that's coming up with a solution before you understand what the problem is.
Yeah.
And I think the problem now is that everybody wants a community, and everybody's starting one or wanting to start one. And they keep failing because they're starting them for the wrong reasons. They're starting with the end product in mind, a community. And they go and they set up a forum or a Slack or something. And then they invite a few people, and then it dies within a few weeks, and they don't know what to do, right? They're left like with this dead place. And that's because they started with community. They've just said, oh, I'm going to start a community, and people will join, and, then success will come. But really what people need to do is just like get friendly with people and trust people, and converse with people and start talking to people, and just getting to know like who they are as people and building that trust up, and then working towards the challenges that need to be solved. And the more you do that, the more you know what you need to do. And as you're doing it, you're building community naturally. So like a community is not a Slack, and it's not a forum. It's people coming together in any way possible. You can come together over email, right? You can come together like this as a conversation. There's so many ways to come together that isn't a forum. And I think that's what people need to get their heads around, is what does community mean? And I have this phrase called, I call it study your people. So basically that's kind of my way of saying, like, let's do research first. It's like, let's spend time really getting to know your people, getting to know the environment, getting to know who's writing what, who's creating what, start to build a reputation, start to gain trust. And then once you understand the landscape and you understand what people are talking about, what they care about, then you'll know what to do next, because you spent that time doing it. And other people wouldn't have spent that time, so you would have that advantage. because it's slow work, right? That most people can't be bothered with. And because it's slow work, you build up that trust so that when you do launch a community, people will come and they'll hang around and you'll know what to give them.
Right. I think it's the kind of communities that I've been a part of, or like the kind of mini communities that I guess helped build. I mean, nowhere near like 25,000, like you did, more like 200, like small. It was always, there was kind of a purpose behind, or like a transformation that we kind of wanted to do together, either almost as an industry, like, you know, we are here now and that's kind of where we want to get. And that's, I guess, almost like a movement thing that you mentioned, right? With Indie Hacker. And these have always been kind of the best communities that I've been a part of. Because it kind of aligned people naturally and you knew why you were there, I guess.
Yeah. It's like, I call it like having a vision over an idea. It's like you need something to strive for together, like as an overall kind of goal, I guess. Because like how you get to that vision can change over time, and the things you need to do can change. So like for me, for Ministry of Testing, it was, I wanted to change the testing industry because when I started it in 2007, it was full of corporate, boring certifications, expensive. And I wanted to do the opposite of that. So my vision was to change the testing industry to be fun, to be more creative, to just more affordable as well, more diverse. So that became like everything I did was like, I would question myself, are we on track? And it's like how we got there, the things we did to get there changed every year. It's like the things we did together, the things we tried out. If something failed, it wasn't necessarily that the community failed. It was just like, oh, we tried a thing. It worked, it didn't work. Okay, let's move on. You know? So it's like you have that kind of vision to like keep yourself going. And sometimes you make progress, sometimes you don't. But I think even when you don't make progress, you learn something, right? You learn, oh, that didn't work. We can try something else. At least we know it didn't work.
I love that because like it's, if you think about it like that, I think you said like not the community fails, it was just one idea how to get to the vision that kind of was tried out and didn't work out that way. At the moment, building up a community again, like starting really, really small for B2B marketing leaders that are coming up kind of. And my idea, I was in that position in the past, and I always found it really difficult to kind of grow with the company. So, because especially first-time leaders, it's really difficult for them to kind of get, okay, you are a marketer, you're a practitioner, and then all of a sudden you have a team, and then you need to do all of that. And most of them are, they haven't really thought about leadership before, right? Or stuff like that, or like conflict resolution and like budgeting and all that. So everything comes at once, and kind of growing yourself with the company at a similar speed is one challenge that I faced myself, and kind of how this grew. And maybe that's an example we can talk about as well, is I was basically talking to several people. They were like asking me through LinkedIn content that I was just putting out from the podcast. And they were like, hey, this sounds interesting. Like, let's go for coffee. And then after the third or fourth person, I was like, oh, they're all talking about the same challenges. Like, that's interesting, right? And then I'm living in Zurich, and which is a very small town. There's like 300,000 people living here, and they didn't know each other. And so I was like, what? How can that be, right? And so I actually today I have the first kind of be around. I mean, we just meet. I don't know what's going to happen, right? But my intention is basically to kind of get people together and solve the challenges that they all seem to have together, right? And since like B2B marketing leaders is pretty narrow, like they are on a similar career trajectory, and so I'm wondering, like, but obviously that's a very it's a very like it's me doing that, but then inside a business, like how could that look like, right? Because usually you already have a community. Would you say that it is applicable to a business, something like I just mentioned?
In the sense that if someone wanted to build a community within a business,
right. I mean, I guess the how narrow should a community be in the beginning versus like, because you build like huge communities, right?
Yeah.
So how narrow versus wide?
Yeah. Yeah. I personally, I prefer the narrow and deep, rather than wide and shallow. So I think there's too much shallowness on the internet or generally in the world, and there's not enough room to go deep. I think people worry that if they go deep, then they can't go wide later. Mm-hmm. So it's like, I think it's like you can't do it all at once, right? So it's like it's not like when I started Ministry of Testing, I didn't say I'm going to go out and change the testing world. I didn't, I never thought it would turn into what it did. I was just like, I'm going to start an online community. I'm going to write something. I'm going to I created a newspaper, right? Which on business terms it failed, but it was so much fun. I had no idea how deep we would go. It was like, if you look at Ministry of Testing and all the learnings and content that's created over the years and the connections, it's gone really deep. Yeah. But I never would have expected that, right? Mm-hmm. So, I think people think too much probably about the big picture. They get excited. They're like, oh, this could be so big and amazing. When really it's just like, just start small and go deep with the small group that you have and see where it goes. Because you don't know where it will go. And perhaps like if you're thinking like strategically, maybe think of things like, well, what are you going to call it, right? If you're going to give it a name, maybe give it a slightly broader name than without being too specific about what you're doing. So it's like, if you're doing like business to business marketing stuff, maybe don't call it business to business as the name, but you can have it like in the descriptions when you're starting out. You can like target those people, but you could have a name that could evolve into something more broad over time. Right. So, that's what I would advise. It's like, maybe work towards a brand, a nice brand, a fun brand over time that can be flexible. Mm-hmm. And I think branding is probably very much underrated in community building as well, like design, branding, mascots and identity. That's a whole like really fun area that good communities do well. Mm-hmm. It's like, they bring a lot of character into the communities they run.
I think that's good advice. Yeah, I think the naming, I think, is something that carries a lot of the branding later on as well, because I mean you kind of feel attached to it. You're like, oh, okay, that's like a memorable name. I'm part of that group. But if you think like as a community builder, I would say, like, what is actually your job? Like what is it that you do? Like, I mean, there's facilitation, but then there's like, I almost think of it like, from my perspective, there is a big group experience, then there is like a small group experience, and then there's like a one-on-one group experience, something like that. But then what is my role in that? Like how much do you control versus like just let it happen?
Yeah, I think this is again something that's like kind of come out of the pandemic. Because like before the pandemic, everyone who managed or built a community was a community manager. That was the only job title, right? There's nothing else going. It was either that or head of community or something like that. It's like no other choice. It's like, I remember having conversations around that before. It was like, well, do I have to call myself a community manager? Isn't there like another job title that I can use? I don't really like the name. But there was nothing. Nobody like, used stuff. And now, like, since the pandemic, people are coming up with all these different names, like community operations, like community design, community architecture, community gardener. All these things are coming up, which is great, right? But, I think it also shows like how varied like a community role is and like how much you can get involved in so many different things. So I definitely think there's like room for community growth, like growth-minded community people who take kind of, more of a community approach to things rather than like a business approach. Things like events. I think all events people should be community builders as well. I don't, it's like how do you build community into these kind of situations? Is an event part of a community? It should be, but traditionally people have seen events as mostly a separate thing that isn't completely or properly integrated into the whole community experience. There's loads of conferences who just do a conference every year,
right?
And that's it. And there's no communication in between. But when like tickets come on for sale, it's like, oh, let's do all the marketing, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I get excited about. I think, well, there's so much room for community to get involved now that it's been taken seriously. It's like how can we integrate events better into the post-COVID world? And this, so many options, right? And I forgot the original question, but what was it again?
What the job is of a community builder? Yeah.
So if you take all that into mind, it's like, what is a job? There's many jobs. So we deserve many roles, or we deserve consideration. And if there aren't those roles, then we need to collaborate, which is totally fine as well. I'm not saying that everyone needs to be a community builder by job title, but event organizers, for example, should look to collaborate with community builders to see how the experience can be integrated. Community, and marketing should collaborate more. They can learn from each other. I think we can all learn from each other. I'd love to be better with words and copy and all of that. But like, imagine like if like every community builder had access to a really good marketeer.
Right. Yeah.
And they joined forces and they found that balance between things. It could be amazing.
What do you think can be, what are great ways to facilitate conversation between people? I mean, a lot of communities, just online communities mainly that I'm part of, kind of passively. I am passively a part of because there is no facilitation much. And so I'm kind of consuming more than I mean, nobody ever reached out to me or something like that. Like, what are good ways, maybe especially early on, to facilitate conversation?
Yeah. Good question. I think like a lot of this comes down to people chasing growth. So it's like when they chase growth, they lack the ability to kind of reach out personally, right? It's hard. I fail at it a lot as well. It's like, how do you manage that? So I mean, I think there's a lot of like things that you can like embed into your processes. So Like in emails, for example, I try to encourage people just to respond to emails that I send out.
Yep.
Say, is that it's me at the end of it. It's not an automated thing. It's me. It's just me. I try to encourage different ways as well. So another option is like putting a Calendly link or whatever tool you prefer to use in emails, or just sending it out places to encourage people to get in contact. I think people feel obliged to kind of send intro messages when people join. And it's like, yeah, they're useful, but it's kind of like, it's like once people do that, then that they feel like their job is done, quite often. And or they automate that, so it just doesn't feel very, very human.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, I guess like, it's like you can do a lot, which is, just reaching out and being available and responding to people and participating wherever possible. I think there will be, or I already see like a trend towards, I guess like services that are like trying to match make. I mean, there's already a few out there. There's a few that are trying to get a bit better and a bit smarter. I think that's interesting. I'm not sure if it will end up turning into, again, something that feels automated, but I think like if people can figure out ways to do that well, and, even to do it in ways where you're connecting people easier, and you're not committing to necessarily having a forum to host conversations. So, again, that's part of like, to have a community, you don't necessarily need a forum, but, you can still facilitate conversations. So if you have these tools that are coming available to match people, you can match people. Yeah. You can send links out to people in a newsletter, or, whatever way you prefer. And it starts kind of to connect people. It's interesting.
Yeah, I think one community that I'm a part of, I think they're doing a great job in terms of they have this kind of bot, I guess, that just randomly matches people, which where you have like 15 to 30 minutes coffee like once a week or once every 2 weeks, which I found interesting. So I kind of have a connection to a few people now in the community that I didn't have before. So now I have a certain attachment, which I don't have in other cases, right? So that is something that I personally liked a lot. Like, what do you think? Like, what does community evolve into? I mean, I guess we had like social networks. There's a lot of people. I see a lot more like smaller communities that are now in because people want to be, as you said, like people want to be seen, people want to connect more. I guess the world opens up a little bit again now, and people are meeting in person again. Like, where do you see all of this going?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't like to predict the future. I think people are overwhelmed. Like COVID is just like, has overwhelmed people. Everyone's gone online, and there's been a lot of pressure to build community online and to show up. I think a lot of people are in too many communities, and then as a result, don't participate in any. Yeah. It's like, it's like the paradox of choice, I guess. It's like there's too much to choose from. They don't know what to do, so they don't do anything. I definitely feel like people are lonely. And I think that's a big problem. It's like you can have lots of friends online, but still be very lonely. Right. I'd love personally to see local communities grow. I think I think if I build another community, I want it to be a local one. I think that will provide me the most meaning. I think, there's not enough when we think of local communities. There's not enough going on. If I look at my local community, there's not enough. It's really hard to meet local people. It's just hard.
Yeah.
And it shouldn't be that hard.
Yeah.
And I want to meet people that, that I feel like I can't talk to people locally about what I do. It's like, obviously there's a few people, but not as many as I would like.
Yeah.
So it's like, I would love, I live in Brighton by the beach. I would love to sit on the beach and just like talk communities with people in real life. And I don't do that enough.
Yeah.
And I think for me, that's where the future is.
Yeah.
Like these smaller based communities that provide a lot of value, a lot of connection. And, hopefully people can let go of this idea that we need like big communities to be valuable.
Yeah. I mean, I think like there is some value in, so for example, what I'm thinking of like the B2B marketer community is having these chapters. I was really inspired by what is the language app?
Duolingo.
Duolingo. So what they did, because I think like the most powerful thing to me is when you can meet people locally with the same interest, but you can plug into a wider network once you're online. And even if I think back at other communities that I've been part with, like there was like hubs, right? So meetups, like, so who is in Zurich, who is in Berlin, who is in New York, so it happens almost naturally. And I think it actually makes the community stronger with these nodes, right? You're almost like creating nodes that are then strong and kind of independent by themselves, but then plugging into the bigger network. And I really hope what you wish for communities to evolve into or to progress into will come to fruition. I mean, it's the same here. Most people that I know, like, there's very little community in like the most basic sense, which is like where you live, where you physically are, right? And having these conversations. So yeah, I hope that's where we will end up in. One question before I think we need to wrap up soon. So you kind of live and breathe online community building, but you mentioned at one point like you also have quite a few kids. So I think you have 5 kids, if I read that correctly somewhere online. Yeah. Have you learned any lessons as a mother that you apply to your community building or vice versa?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. My whole life is intermingled. My philosophy to parenting is similar to my philosophy to communities, and my philosophy to how we educate our kids is the same. It's like we homeschool, we unschool, so they don't go to school. We've got 5 kids aged between 3 and 17. And like, as I've been building up like Ministry of Testing and then trying to figure out what I want to do with my life and how I feel content living my life, and how I tried working for other people when I was younger, I guess. And it was just horrible. How I could just not survive doing something that I didn't enjoy day to day. It was like, for me, it was torturous. It was like, bad for my health. And then when I can compare it to doing things that I do enjoy, and having the creative freedom to do things, to input my ideas, that's how I live, and that's how I build community. That's how I raise my kids, with kindness, with respect, with listening to them as human beings. I think there's so many like crossovers, like with kids, like if you want to go down a rabbit hole, you can go down huge rabbit holes. But with kids, like society treats them differently. They don't treat them like adults, or not that they should treat them like adults. They don't treat them with the respect that they deserve. They don't give them the choices. They don't give them a voice. When people look at me strange when I say they don't go to school, and say, "Oh, but how do they make friends?" And how do they learn, and all these kind of things. And we're so conditioned to thinking that there's only one way to do it. There's only the only way to learn is to follow a curriculum. And it's the same with work. The only way to work is to have a 9-to-5 job. It's not true. It's not true, right? So it's like there's choices in life. We all have choices. There's many choices, and my choice is to live a more freeing, creative, and respectful way of being, and it applies to all my life.
That's beautiful, and also it ties back to what you said at the very beginning, that your community members want to be heard, and your kids want to be heard, and your spouse wants to be heard, and I think that's where real connections are made. And in the end, if we can think a little bit more about that and a little bit less about the metrics, I think that's a great message to put out there. So, wrapping up, like, what is there a message that you kind of want to tell to people that are building communities, that are thinking about building communities, like anything that comes to mind that you want to put out there?
Yeah, start small. Do things that don't scale. Start small, and it's not about the tools. It's about what you want to build. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
I think, that's a marketing. I know this very well for marketing. Like, everybody talks about the tools, and nobody about what's the system and the processes behind. Okay, cool, perfect. So, where can people find you? I mean, you're doing a lot of stuff. We talked about it a little bit before before we started recording. Yeah. So, where do you want to direct people to?
Yeah. So I'm Rosie Sherry on Twitter. I'm there a lot. So go check me out there. I write and do stuff about community on rosie.land. I have a weekly newsletter there and other stuff, all about community. And then I work for Orbit, so that's orbit.love. I also write about community there. So yeah, good.
You found your niche.
Yeah.
So that's rosie.land, right?
Yeah.
Rosie.land. All right, perfect. Well, Rosie, this was a pleasure. Thank you very much for your time, and I hope to see you on the internet.
Thank you, and maybe one day in real life, right?
Yes. On Brighton on the beach.
Yeah. Yes.
Sounds good. Bye, Rosie. Bye-bye.